Kia ora, my name's Ditchfield. I'm a dairy farmer in Northern Southland, and I'm recording this on behalf of Feature Whenua Summit. I got asked to speak by Zeb, and we unfortunately ran out of time on the days that I was due to speak, so I agreed to give the recording so he could put it on his website, hence probably why you're listening to it now. So thank you, Zeb. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity. I felt really honoured and privileged actually, and I thought long and hard about what I was going to speak to, and I guess the message I'd like to give to the audience to take away and maybe do some reflection on. So I've broken my story into three different areas. Firstly, I'd like to go into a little bit of my history through my tūpuna, my ancestors, also then into our journey through in the regenerative type system that we're doing and transitioning into, and lastly I want to touch on some leadership stuff, so maybe how we can start thinking differently about leadership in the ag space. So to keep it in line with the summit, I need to give you some context to why I want to talk through my story, or my tūpuna. So we know as Māori and as indigenous people around the globe that they have a really close connection with their whenua, their land, and they can pull on their tūpuna for guidance and wisdom to look forward into the future in terms of centuries, for guidance for them, in decision making on the present day. So as Pākehā, I believe that we've lost that ability to look back for guidance and then look forward even past a decade. So here's my story, my personal tie to the land through my ancestors. I'm a fifth generation Kiwi Pākehā farmer, coming from a line of 4 generations before me. My great-great-grandparents farmed under the great mountain of Mount Taranaki, near a small town of Harawa. It was there that they broke in the land by hand and milked a small Jersey pedigree herd. And my great-grandfather Hector and Agnes Taylor, unfortunately in 1932, had to walk off their land through the Great Depression, and they moved their family from Harawa through to the Bay of Plenty in a small district of Pukahina, and they're working for a company called Duncan and Corrigan, started breaking in some land for them, eventually shemonking on this land for them. And then as time went on, my grandparents then also broke in their whenua and started farming on that land in Pukahina. And it was here in Pukahina that they farmed for many years, and I used to stay with my grandparents as a kid, and this is where I got my passion for farming and staying with my uncles and aunties who were also shemonking in the district. So I entered farming myself in 1990. I was farming in Rotorua and Te Puke in my early 20s. Eventually after marrying my sweetheart, my wahine, Cherie, and after going on a 2-year OE adventure overseas, we moved to Southland in 1997 and began our own shemonking career. In the past 25 years, since our arrival in Southland, we've ventured into many different types and scale of dairy farming operations, and actually sheep and beef. We now dairy farm on a property milking 450 cows in a wee place called Wendonside, which is in northern Southland, and we've been on this property for 19 years. Our farm boundary is the Mataura River, which is nestled at the foothills of the Garby Mountains, where the Mataura weaves its way through and eventually comes out and enters onto the Waimea Plains. And so it's at this foothills that our farm is where we reside. I think in part of the story, our story, it's important to note that for the first 10 years in Southland, we were chasing growth and progress, because it's kind of the dairy farming way. You've got a career path and you're chasing that, looking over the fence a little bit. And we became very good at playing the game and following the recipe of the conventional dairy farming system, with a hunger for asset growth and financial wealth. However, this drive of wealth started to become a bit addictive to me, and I found myself wanting to continue pushing for more and more, even though we already actually had enough. and eventually it came at the cost of the most important people to me, which is my wife and family. And it was actually the global recession in 2008 that I'm actually most grateful for, because that landed me flat on my face and amongst a lot of debt and chaos, and was all around me. It forced me to take a good, long, hard look at myself and ask myself what was really important, in life. And it was the suffering through this part of the journey that transformed our business, and to have a real people-centric focus instead of always, focusing on the tangible outcomes. And after experiencing this freedom we gained from the transition, we began to look around us and saw other people in strife and chaos, and becoming a slave to their business with no freedom at all. And it's these observations that inspired Sheree and I to found a life leadership and business course, helping other people to transform their lives and business. And we've been facilitating this for the past 6 years, and it gives us a real sense of fulfillment. So onto our regenerative journey. Actually going to putting pen to paper such to think about what's been happening the last 18 months since we started the transition. I've realised that we've actually come a long way in a short space of time. But I'll take you back 2 years ago. So I'm not sure if you remember back 2 years ago, or whether you want to remember back that far. However, there was a lot of anti-agricultural commentary happening, hitting the headlines on social media regarding the impact that agriculture was having on water quality, climate change, and animal welfare. And it's still here today, but not quite as loud, because I think that the COVID event has suppressed it a lot because of how we've kind of rescued the country's economy, those sort of stories. But 2 years ago, Sheree and I were feeling less optimistic about the future of agriculture in this country. Up until that point, we were really grateful for our lives that we'd lived. We're grateful for our whānau, for what we'd achieved in agriculture, but our passion for the industry, to be honest, was starting to wane. This conventional linear system that we'd done so well from was starting to recognise some of the unintended consequences from these practices, and we started to think, thinking about if we're going to keep farming this way, that we're going to actually hand on a burden to the next generation. But then we met Mark and Madeline Anderson, dairy farmers that are farming in Clinton, south of Otago, and it was through their participation in our life leadership and business course that we got to learn about Regen Ag, as that's what they were practicing. It was Mark's personal story through his recent, battle with Crohn's disease, and his determination to find a better alternative farming system that would improve human health, that really inspired us to look into what this regenerative farming thing was all about. Up until this point, we've been riding on the wave of this conventional system. For me, I'm not a green finger. I'm not a tree hugger. I used to think soil science was extremely boring, but we knew how to grow grass through a conventional management system and with chemicals. So we did our research on the concept. We looked at books. We looked online on a heap of stuff. Spoke to a number of people. We visited the Andersons' farm, and the more we learnt about the cyclic system, the importance of biodiversity, working with nature, bringing soil to life, the more convincing the system became to us. And in the end, it actually just made sense. The thing that really got me inspired was the potential impact of what consuming nutrient-dense food could have on human health and well-being. We knew that the journey was going to have its trials and tribulations, and that would be judged more harshly by our farming peers than anyone else. But we felt that this challenge and the journey before us was overwhelmingly, we needed to accept, and it just felt right. So in September 2019, we started to fully transition our dairy farm to what we currently describe as a regenerative type system. We've been transitioning for 18 months now, and we decided to engage with a independent soil consultant, Michael Cashmore, from Integrity Soils, right from the start, so he can help us in, with this really foreign world of what we're starting to transition into. And also we decided to take on Siobhan Griffin from her business of High Level Grazing to help us with the grazing management aspect of regen. So you might ask now, what have we noticed that that's changed so far? So two key things, aspects of a business that we've managed to maintain to date are our farm profit and farm production. These are the two things that when people think of transitioning onto something different, completely different, that they're going to drop off the end of the cliff straight away. So we've managed to maintain these two. We've reduced our annual nitrogen imports from 180 units to 70 now, and we want to, and we've substantially decreased our chemical fertilizers as well. We now apply liquid biology feeders to crank up the soil livestock. We've sown 16% of our milking platform into multi-species permanent pastures. We've sown a number of summer and winter crops, multi-species, and I guess to give you an idea of what we're monitoring now, we've got GPS plots over the farm. There's 4 of them, and we're monitoring the trends from them through getting comprehensive tests done on soil and pasture, and also a lot of observation as well. So what we've, in this journey so far in 18 months, we've found that our active soil, active fungi levels have improved, with our total fungi doubling to almost desired levels, which is a real biggie, trying to get that 1-to-1 ratio of fungi and bacteria with our current conventional farms having high bacteria with little fungi in them. Our protozoa levels have increased by 500% to close to desired levels. Observations things of our water infiltration testing, that has dramatically increased in areas. It's certainly increased all over the place, but dramatically in some areas. We've seen increased worm numbers. Our bricks levels, which is sugar level in the pasture, has tripled. Thatch that we found in the older pastures initially has now disappeared. Through our visual soil assessments, which is a standard assessment that you can do anywhere, we've increased by 3 to 4 units. Our root depth has increased. We use a penetrometer now with measuring soil compaction, and it's showing that our compaction has reduced quite a bit. We've noticed increased clover, with the nodules on the roots now actually actively fixing in, and you can, I guess, with the reduced end applications, this is why this is happening. And we've also observed a decrease in weed infestation. So what are we monitoring? Just daily, weekly, yearly. We dig a lot of holes. We look at the biology in the soil underneath, not just the pasture. We do these comprehensive soil and pasture tests, as I've said. We're measuring bricks and nutrient density weekly now on grazing on our pasture walks. We're measuring the pH of the cow urine and monitoring our MUNs more closely. And these are the things we never really took any notice of on the conventional system. So far the grazing aspect of the transition has been the most challenging. Going into high covers, eating a third, leaving a third and trampling a third, messes with my brain because I'm so hardwired to the conventional system. We've been doing this for many years. But I get the philosophy of the high covers, and that getting the bigger solar panels out to harness the energy from the sunlight that will go into producing more nutrient dense pastures. The biggest barrier is changing my own mindset and the ability to think differently. Right now we're doing a lot of we're looking at the practice of bale grazing quite seriously, and we think it's a real game changer, particularly in Southland, as a wintering option. So the concept is that with bale grazing is there's 100 cows. We put them on a half a hectare with 13 to 15 bales with no hay racks, and they get moved every 3 days. We tried this with our calving, our springers last year, or this season, and what we observed was surprisingly little pasture damage, and we actually have been milking of these same paddocks in our second round of from the start of lactation. And what we noticed also was the cows are really content. 80% of the time, cows were sitting on the bale litter or calving on the bale litter, which means they're not standing on the pasture itself and doing damage. And we had really very little calf mortality. And when they went into the sheds, the calves had a lot of energy, and they suckled straight away onto the cafeterias. And that, so 7 months on now, after done the bag grazing in those paddocks, we did one of the plots that we tested in that paddock, and we've seen an incredible transformation of the soil that sits under the bale litter. Infiltration was amazing when we put the pipe. Basically, infiltration test is a pipe that goes in the ground. You smack in. I'm explaining it very very basically, and you pour in an inch of water, or 2 inches, an inch at a time, and you measure how long it takes for that water to infiltrate into the soil. That's as basic as it is really, and it needs to absorb within 12 minutes each inch, and if it does, then it's pretty good infiltration. If it's over 12 minutes, then it's not. We just did a couple of weeks ago when we did this under the bale litter. The first inch took 10 seconds to infiltrate, and the second inch took 13 seconds. It was incredible. And so when we dug up the soil, the structure, the mottling had dramatically improved. It was quite an incredible sight actually. A very fast way to fast track soil healing. So we've also engaged with Ag Research, who have actually committed to conducting a 3-year trial on one of our bale grazing paddocks, and we're going to measuring what they want to do. One of the key things they're measuring is nitrate leaching in some plots that we've fenced off, and the comparisons are between bale grazing, conventional cropping, and milking platform. And they're also going to monitor other soil and animal welfare aspects of within the trial as well. So you might ask, what outcomes are we hoping to see through the transition? What are some of the tangible and non-tangible things we're hoping to see? So practically, our plan is to eventually reduce our urea and maybe even eliminate it, and eliminate our chemical sprays as well. We're hoping to, through trial and error, to be 100% bale grazing on grass in Southland in 2 years. The challenge currently with bale grazing is that it's hard to measure the economics of it because of the soil healing that's happening. How much extra growth is that soil now going to grow in grass once we do the bale grazing on those paddocks? And you really got to take that to account into the economics of it, because obviously you're comparing that to cropping, which is conventional farming practices as it is now, and we all know what happens to soil after we see what happens after grazing cropping. So eventually we'd like to eliminate cultivation also, and from the system, and also just with a small amount of drilling into some patch-up areas with a total grass feed system and having no cropping at all. Some of the tangible outcomes, so the medium long-term operation, we'd like to see increased profits, decreased costs, and also decreasing our stocking rate while trying to maintain our production. However, the real meaningful outcomes here are where we increasing the biodiversity in the soil through growing the biology, getting water cycling happening again through improved infiltration, and seeing the rain that falls actually getting absorbed into the ground instead of running off into the waterways, taking the nutrients with it. Having the real ability to sequence carbon with longer pastures and deeper root zones, and having no bare soil, and it's these outcomes that will achieve improved animal health, and well-being that will naturally go into improving human health and well-being. Something that really excited me recently was on a quorum sense discussion panel, and there was a story from a guy called Maya Smith, who farms in the North Island in Ātiamuri in the Waikato. And Maya he's been on his regen journey for 5 years now, and his animal health costs 5 years ago were $100 per cow, and last season it was 28, so 4 years on, $28, and this season he believes it's looking like it's going to be under $20 for his animal health costs. So, you know, if I had 2 glasses of milk and one was from one of Maya's cows, under $20 animal health inputs, and one from an average Waikato farm, which is actually $117 today, you know, which glass of milk would you drink? So this just speaks volumes to me about what originally inspired us to look at the the real potential of this system and what it means for human health and well-being, not to mention the environmental and climatical impacts. So the whole change and transition has not only opened our eyes to opportunity, it's opened our eyes to other opportunities, but also it's enhanced our observation and awareness. We're noticing more wildlife that we've never seen before, plants and pastures that we used to just drive by. We're stopping now and sort of trying to work out what plants they are. Our team are completely on board with the transition. They're going beyond the call of duty now to develop better new routines and habits and behaviours. The conversations we're having are way more engaging now, and we feel a lot more connected to our whenua than ever before. And we're now thinking a lot more holistically when we're making decisions, and not just about the immediate impact that we have that the singular decision is making. And we're thinking about our operation and what it would look like with maybe more diversity in it, not just having dairying as the sole way of how we farm, or what other things could maybe complement dairying. But for now, we're really just trying to take the responsibility on to learn the craft and understand the pitfalls, so we can help and guide support others that decide to transition into the conventional, away from the conventional mindset. And we believe our leadership in the Regen Ag, here is going to have the biggest impact. Which leads, I guess, me on to the last few comments into leadership that I'd like to make through, leadership through disruption and change, which is kind of what we're going through currently. There's a lot of unrest in our industry right now. There's a number of groups that are popping up, anti-agriculture and pro, that are defending and accusing each other. It's become quite the battlefield for those who choose to engage in it. And Sheree and I have chosen a wee while ago now not to engage in any of this commentary, and we consider it to be a real complete waste of energy. Instead, we've chosen to put our energy into finding solutions, and just like many of you guys out there in the ag system, and finding solutions into issues that we know need to be addressed. In saying this, I do really empathise with and feel compassionate to those waging this war, because simply I don't think they know any other way to respond to change. So you can actually hear the fear and anxiety in their voices at times. And a lot of this fear and anxiety emerges from how we define ourselves, and that is through either what we have, what we do, or what we believe other people think of us. And understanding this is kind of fundamental into knowing how we can approach, the type of leadership that's needed to have in the conversations to help bring these people on the journey with us, in this journey of change. I applaud Beef and Lamb's response recently to some of the levy payers that were commenting that they were being too soft with the government, etc. And their response to that was, there's no point in attacking others if it's going to stop you from having a seat around the table where you can actually have real influence on your own future. And it's these discussions around the table with the people leading this change that are most critical. Really identifying the strength and diversity of that whole group and having a real preparedness to collaborate with all the stakeholders and the courage to be vulnerable with those stakeholders. Leaning in to all of this with your authenticity will illustrate your preparedness to move forward and action positive change. We often hear a lot of people talking, and however, if we want to action some meaningful change, it all starts with the ability to listen, because to be understood, we first need to understand. I really admire the leadership of Quorum Sense and how they've chosen to lead, not to engage in any confrontation or debate, but to encourage the regenerative principles without judgment and give support to farmers looking for guidance. So finally, the question I put to our organisations, our leaders and everyone in our industry is, how can we inspire instead of motivating with a stick? How can we have the conversations with our people that will alleviate anxiety and fear of change? Because if we can inspire our people, they will engage in the journey of change. Thank you again to the Future of Whenua for the opportunity to give this recording. Shui and I really thoroughly enjoyed the Whenua Summit and the just what it brought in its uniqueness. Although what we saw with the future leadership of the young folk coming through, and purely how you staged this event, it was really amazing. It really gives me confidence and inspiration into how where to with agriculture from here. Ngā mihi, go well. Thanks.